This is a chapter called The Cuban. The heavy air sticks to every curve of our bodies, and the wind whips hair around my head. The moonlight has been warped by the heat in the sky, making it a purpley glow drifting down from the darkest blue abyss. He caresses every corner of the road with terrific speed. Every bend we hit, I feel like we're going to fly off it and into the jungle. But I know that he has the rusty 57 Ducati under control. Latinos and their motorbikes, am I right? We're somewhere on the back roads of Havana. To our left, big white plantation-style houses hug the streets, ghosts of a revolution past. On our right, the jungle beckons. There's a 50-foot drop-off where lies a still water pool, dark and murky. I hold on to his waist tightly. If I were to fall off, I'd never find my way home. I haven't actually been home, my real home, back in Massachusetts for nearly a month. Cuba has become a temporary home for me, a life I'd only ever heard about in movies or seen on TV, read about in books. My mom had gone with a group of friends about 6 months earlier on an artist visa. Her friends were part of an all-female reggae band called Gaia Roots. The white 30-somethings from affluent New England towns donned dreadlocks and wore earth-toned organic cotton dresses and flowing pantaloons. Their small parties always boasted hummus, vegetarian chili, and drum circles pounding over a setting sun in the mountains of Western Mass. My mother most always took us with her. Jah forbid she let my little sister and I miss out on anything countercultural to the stiff parents of the immersed socialite circles. For this trip, she was their photographer, and so was able to go with them and experience a country she'd only known about as a potential nuclear threat. She told me how she had practiced diving under her school desk and cupping her head with her hands, curling up into a ball until the sirens subsided. When she returned from that first trip to Cuba, she dropped her suitcases in the living room dramatically. She was tanned, wearing this thick, white shell necklace, and looked younger than usual. She had been gone for 10 days and came back raving about the country's cultural riches and what it had to offer, and how she was going to take us there as soon as possible, which, it turned out, was going to be that upcoming summer. I thought it was just another one of her crazy ideas, but I should have known better. Not too often in my mother's life has something gone undone, unless, of course, you're talking about paperwork. When it involved traveling to a country where we knew no one and knew even less about the culture, that she was sure to get done. Venturing into the unknown was one of my mother's strong suits. It often felt scary, especially if you were one of her children in tow, but she hardly was daunted by the prospect of not knowing what was coming next. I have a more complicated relationship to the unknown and relish in planning. My troves of diaries and handwritten calendars tell me this was always so. Come July 2000, and Mia, my little sister, and I were sitting in the car fighting about nothing. Our mother was busy getting lost trying to find Montreal's airport after we were detained by immigration crossing the border from Vermont to Canada for having a lot of big bags full of clothes. They were for the Cubans we were going to stay with in Havana, though, of course, we couldn't tell Canadian immigration that we were Americans going to Cuba illegally by flying through their country. On her previous trip, my mom had learned what Cubans craved most. Cut off from the United States and all its material wonders was American dollars and American clothing. We didn't have a lot of dollars, but we had plenty of clothes to spare, what with being thrift store junkies and all. Once we made it to the airport, parked in the long-term lot, and got to check-in, the gate agents were also peeved with how many bags we had with us and must have thought that we were trying to immigrate. But they didn't work for the government, so they seemingly didn't care as long as we paid for extra baggage. We were the last ones to board, and I was in tears by that point. The stress of leaving my bubble-safe town and friends for an entire summer for what I thought was a third-world country was too much to handle for my sensitive teen composition. We had to walk up the entire aisle because our seats were at the back, obviously, and my shame at the state of us just made me cry harder. The plane ride had been bumpy, and landing always made me sick. As we descended lower, I looked out the window and saw sandy-colored skies and crumbling pink and blue sea-washed buildings. What was she thinking? moving us to Cuba for a summer. It's communist or it's socialist or whatever. In any event, it's unstable and scary, and she is crazy, and I know it. My first taste of Cuba was customs, and it was a bitter one. See, the deal was, if you were American, as you went through, and the big man with the mustache and smudge glasses looked at you, looked at your passport, looked at you again, you were supposed to ask him, "Por favor, no estampar mi pasaporte." Apparently, asking them to please not stamp your passport worked on my mom's last trip. But that man took that black, heavy stamp and looked me straight in the eye and smashed it down on page 13. As I walked through the fluorescent lit room, I looked over at my mother, tears welling. "They stamped it. I'm never getting back into America. That's it. I'm stuck here forever. They'll never let me back." She turned to me and said, "Honey, that's 2 months away. We'll figure out something by then." Both she and my little sister had asked the same question I did, in a different line to a different mustached man, and no one stamped their passports. I know my mother was trying to take me away from all that I experienced during the last 18 months. The rape, the lawyers, leaving my old school, starting a new school, falling in love with Andy, getting broken up with by Andy, watching my new group of best friends leaving for college. But I felt like she was kidnapping me and taking me off to a far-off island, which she kinda was. I channeled all my angst into promising myself that I wasn't going to have any fun. I wasn't going to learn anything or meet anyone. Diary entry, July 23rd, 2000. Yesterday, the Garcias, our landlords, who live above us, celebrated their daughter's first birthday. There was a clown who sang and danced and got the kids to do it with him. I thought to myself, Jesus, the kids in America don't have rhythm at all. There was so much food, there was lots of family and friends. The men here, and the boys are as well, are unbelievable. Every single one of them, 6 to 60, whistle/whisper at you, make kissing noises, and make their fingers into the shape of saying small, which I still haven't figured out what it means. Carnival last night was amazing! Exclamation point. Millions of people drinking, dancing, singing, having a ball. End of diary entry. My mother had, not intentionally, I think, basically given me the equivalent of Saturday night at the local university frat house. It was exactly everything I wanted and nothing I needed. Our house was in the El Vedado neighborhood of Havana. My mother had found the Garcias through her Gaia Roots friends. Oscar lived in the top half of the pre-revolutionary two-story with his wife, Virginia, and 2 kids, Oscar Jr. and Rosa. We stayed in the bottom half apartment. The front porch had 2 gigantic stone pillars separating into 3 equally sized sections. Upon entering the living room where large slabs of marble made up the floor, another huge stone pillar dissected it with the dining room. To the right, there were both bedrooms, the front one of the larger 2 with a squeaky bed and a rusted iron frame, an armoire and a vanity, all circa 1955. The bathroom was in between the 2 bedrooms with a door on each side opening up to both rooms. I was pleasantly surprised to find it had working utilities and even a shower curtain. The smaller of the 2 bedrooms I don't remember as well, but the crucifix nailed above the head of the mattress is clear in my mind. All the way back to the left of the apartment was the kitchen. To my surprise, and this time not the good kind, the floor was cold dirt packed hard as to be almost stone. Sweeping a dirt floor was yet a new skill I had to learn. There was a small refrigerator, stove, sink, and some cabinet space. Everything looked as though it had been through an A-bomb and then left where it lay for 50 years. The furniture was adequate, only what was needed. The couch was this old chaise with a silk embroidered coverings and elegant wood-carved arms. It looked like something Betty Davis would have lounged on in between scenes of some backlot of Hollywood. We had a record player, a radio, and a telephone, the cradle kind with a circular dial. No TV, no VCR, no computer. On the Malecon, the wall along the sea that traces the city of Havana, there were deeply tanned teenage Cuban boys who hung out by day and whistled at passing girls by night. Nighttime to Havana is what 8 a.m. is to Wall Street. Around 10 at night, we would slip on our light summer dresses, scrunch our humidified curls, and flounce out the door, 3 amigas, despite the vast age difference and the fact that one of them was our mother. We'd walk the 8 blocks to downtown, Mama in her silvery hair bouncing in the moonlight, my little sister still wearing braces, and me, vibrantly young and inviting of all eyes. I was still determined to make my mother believe that I didn't like any of it, but truthfully, Old Havana was magic. Ancient Spanish-inspired churches surrounded the main square where European tourists snapped their candids. Patio cafes served the most succulent mojitos from the most sophisticated waiters in their slick penguin suits. Cubanos raced around chatting to anyone who'd listen, trying desperately, innocently, to get their money by offering this tour or that boat ride. This late at night, though, the locals would outnumber the tourists. The salty, warm air entranced everyone into believing that despite living in a poor country with a dictator for a president, dancing was never going to stop. Buenas noches, señoras, cooed a handsome Cubano of about 30. My little sister giggled. I popped out my right hip, hand attached, and my mother responded, "Señor, could you tell me of any fun places to go and dance tonight? My daughters and I are new around here," and the man cut her off. "Such a beautiful family. Dios mío, you are American." He didn't wait for an answer, or apparently saw my rolling eyes. "Just a couple blocks from here is Agualos. You would like it." "Gracias. Which way is it?" said my mother. The man said he'd bring us there himself, and my mom started to follow. I tugged her hand and through my teeth asked, "Is that such a wise idea?" "It'll be fine," she said. So I followed too. Live salsa music floated through the rum-infused air. Everywhere in Cuba smelled sweet and boozy at night. The clubs were tiny and packed. The first time in one of these mini dance halls, I stood in a corner and watched my mother spin and dip with the 30-something Cubano. My heart felt the beats and my feet tapped timidly, but I couldn't imagine how to get on that floor and begin to move like those women moved, like my mother moved. Even with 12 years of classical ballet training, I didn't know how I could possibly do that. Then someone took my hand and ripped me onto the floor. It happened so suddenly, there wasn't time to protest, so I didn't. His hands sat lightly on my hips and he began to step. 1, 2, 3, beat, 5, 6, 7, beat. My feet followed, and then my legs and my hips, and soon my shoulders were loosening as the music hit my head. But back in our apartment the next day, I still complained, groaning to my mother about the heat, the grime, the people, or the crappy apartment we were in. I lay on the cool chaise, the only thing that kept the sweltering state of my body at bay, and I got lost in some D-list paperbacks that were, to my luck, in English. "Why don't you take a walk?" my mother asked. "No thanks, I'll just keep reading my books," I said. I seethed. "You don't know what you're missing, Valentina. There's so much to do and see here, and you just lay there and whine and whine. You should really get off your ass and explore." My sister listened in from the bedroom, and I can practically hear her smirk because my mom said ass, which then meant that she could use it and potentially not get in trouble. I didn't want to go outside, and I didn't want to stay indoors either. I knew what was out there. Men, boys, their eyes on my skin. I liked it, but also I didn't. This felt different than high school or college the college parties I frequented. I didn't know what the men here wanted. I certainly didn't know what I wanted. Sometimes I thought about their sun-drenched skin touching mine, and when I thought about that, I didn't think about anything else. I stormed out the front door and got about a block and a half before I came upon 4 wrinkled men sitting around a folding table, wobbly on the cracked sidewalk. A sad tree with a trunk the size of a Mini Cooper sprouted from the cement and hung over their heads. Each one slammed down his domino, reverberating the precise snapping sound through my brain in the quiet street. The game moved quickly, and I slowed down to watch. After the round was over, the men turned and noticed me. One, the eldest, I presume, in his 70s for sure, spoke to me in Spanish. I stared back and finally managed to squeak, "No habla español?" He sighed as if to say he knew exactly where I came from. A younger man in his mid-30s spoke in English with a thick Cuban accent. He asked my name. I gave it. He asked where I was from. I told him. There was a quick silence, and then they all chimed in. "Ah, Americana. Que linda." I didn't back away from the compliment. "Yes, that's me. I'm staying up the street with my mother and sister. We live with the Garcias." The 30-something man spoke again. "Oscar, he is my cousin. I'm Javier." He offered his hand and took mine and kissed the top of it. "Please sit. Do you know how to play?" I didn't sit, but I leaned on a tree trunk in the late afternoon heat and watched and listened as these men played their game. I tried to join in the conversation as Javier tried to translate for me a bit. When I asked what they thought of Castro, thinking politics was fair game, they quieted, put their pointer finger to their lips and glanced upward to nowhere in particular, as if to say that someone could be watching or listening. I didn't bring up the dictator again. It turned out, as a 16-year-old American girl, I was quite the hot commodity in Cuba. I didn't know when it happened, but sometime within the first few days of arriving, I'd been asked out on a date. I'd met Alberto, a 29-year-old lawyer and a friend of the Garcias, at the birthday party that first day, and by my third night in town, he was picking me up in an old limo that was now just used as a cab. He brought flowers. My mother was wary because of his age, but she wasn't wary enough to not let me go. Alberto was handsome, with dark and wavy hair cut short and a sturdy, tanned face. His hands were strong and led me easily into the waiting cab/limo. He was wearing tan slacks and a light-colored linen short-sleeved button-up. His shoes looked like the ones my grandfather wore in photographs from the 1950s. I was in a flower print dress and espadrilles with dangly earrings on. Alberto told the driver where to take us. I recognized the name, but I couldn't remember where from. About 15 minutes later, the cab pulled up to the huge horseshoe driveway at the Hotel Nacional de Cuba. I remember the way the lights hit the palm trees blowing softly in the night breeze. The hotel loomed in front of us with its white Art Deco architecture and two magnificent bell towers. Stepping out of the cab, I felt like royalty. Frank Sinatra, Ava Gardner, Winston Churchill, Nat King Cole, so many illustrious individuals had stepped out of their cars there, where I just stepped out, and dined at the tables there, and slept in the beds there. I didn't feel like a 16-year-old. I felt special, wiser, worthy of being taken to dinner at the Hotel Nacional. I had a couple more dates with Alberto, pretending to be a woman who knew how to handle a 29-year-old man. We did more than just kiss, I wrote in my journal. Not that I regret it, but the men here are possessive. But it fizzled quickly when I wouldn't have sex with him or accept his marriage proposal. I was proposed to by another Cuban as well, a bit more age appropriate, a 17-year-old this time, the one who took me on his motorcycle. But I had to say no to him as well. I didn't know how to give them what they really wanted, a ticket out of Cuba. So instead, I let them kiss me and touch me, and it helped me too, because I forgot about my broken heart back home. I forgot about the lawyers and the rape and school. I forgot about myself.